PerfTalk is brought to you in part by gcrockboard.com, home of quality handcrafted pedal boards and your number one source for some of the best pedal brands in the market.
Okay, how did you get your start doing sessions? For that Inner Circle gig, I mean, you weren't really a reggae musician, but you got into that gig anyway.
Yeah, I got that gig. I was playing another gig, and our keyboard player was friends with the drummer from Inner Circle. And the drummer from Inner Circle came to our gig, checked it out. At the time, they were in need of a touring guitar player. And he liked what I did. He liked how I played, and invited me out to their studio to hang out and rehearse or audition or whatever. So that's basically how it all, actually that's kind of how it all started, even with the recording sessions, because he was kind of like my entryway into a lot of the recording sessions that I did, because Inner Circle owns a really nice recording studio kind of complex. They call it Circle House, but it's in North Miami. So while I was touring with them, they would ask me to come and hang out at the studio, the house, and kind of be an on-call guitar player for various producers and stuff. So they kind of got my foot in the door for me for like that session I did for the Tupac Shakur stuff. A lot of the R&B stuff I did at their studio. So
Nice.
Okay, what would be your top 5 tips for players wanting to break into that or to get into that?
My number one tip is meet as many people as possible. Obviously, right now you can't go out and meet people, but try to just be friendly with people, because you never. I say this all the time. You never know who's gonna call you for a gig or for a session or something. So it's very important to network and be friendly with people and get on their good side and everything, because I think, at least for me in my experience, that's how I got, when I think about how I got gigs and work and stuff, that's, it was a phone call from somebody, or my number got passed around because people knew me, or they respected me, or they could vouch for me or whatever. So it's number one is meet as many people as you can, network. And then kind of like with any work I do, it's just kind of don't be a dick. It's like,
yeah, that's important.
I mean, you could be the most talented guitarist in the world, but if you don't have a great personality, or you're not fun to work with, then you're not going to get the gig, or you're not going to keep the gig. So just, be personable, be a good person, and that'll show through. And people, you could be, not the greatest musician or an okay musician, but you have a great personality, and you're going to get called, you're going to get hired because people want to hang out with you and work with you. So that's really just the 2 main tips that I always have for people that want to get into the business.
Is location a factor?
It was. But it also depends on what kind of work you want to get into. If you want to get into high-profile studio work, for the most part, LA and Nashville are where you want to be. But that's a whole nother can of worms, because you have to get into those circles first, which could take a lifetime. If you want to be a touring guy, kind of the same thing, LA, Nashville, New York, Miami. I did get some decent tours when I lived in Miami, but it was limited. The genres are limited because the market coming out of Miami is Latin music, world music, reggae, and hip hop, R&B sometimes. I don't know if it is now. And then this is, at least as far as I know, when I was working in those markets. But I mean, nowadays, because we have social media and internet and YouTube and everything, you can get discovered and you can work remotely. Like if you want to do session work, it's definitely possible for you to get work remotely and do just e-sessions and email files back and forth. But I know at least here in Nashville, it rarely works out like that because it's such a business that's been around for a long time. Like the recording business here in Nashville has been around for forever. And so they're dialed in, like going to the studio and having session times blocked. It's like a normal job here. So, but in LA, it's different.
Yeah, well, I guess like for some producers, they're after the studio sound as well, right? For their setup.
Yes. Being able to play with other musicians at the same time to get that take is a big thing too.
Yeah, and unless you have a setup like Tim Pierce.
Yeah, well,
it's hard to get. It's hard to get that trust.
Yeah, Tim is like he's been there, done that. He's trustworthy. People know what they're going to get when they hire Tim to do sessions, so he doesn't have to go to a studio necessarily.
Yeah, just sit in his control, his mothership.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, that's kind of how I would want to do it. I just did a session at a friend's studio a couple weeks ago, and I had to kind of tear down all my gear to bring it over there. And I was like, it would have been a lot easier if you just send me the files, and because all my amps are already hooked up and ready to go, and all my guitars are here. So I would have had more access to different sounds had I just worked in my home studio, as opposed to only being able to bring like 4 or 5 guitars and a couple pedals and 2 amps or whatever.
And then when you moved around, did that influence the type of session work that you got as well? Or did you move because of the session work that you got, or that you got hired for?
It was kind of, I moved because I was seeking certain types of work. So, I kind of started my professional career in Miami. And I had just toured with Ricky Martin. This was like 2007. And I was like, this is probably the highest level of touring that I'm going to get out of Miami. And I want to get something more. I want more. I want something bigger. I want like a big pop tour. So I had, the great idea of moving to LA because I wanted to do whatever pop tour, rock tour, basically like, English market stuff, because it was different than what I was doing in Miami. And that was more my thing, is like, I started playing guitar because I wanted to be in a rock band or a touring whatever. I moved out to LA and didn't do any of that. I just did whatever gigs, and I actually, I did tour when I was living in LA, but the tours that I got were still out of Miami. So I was still getting called for like Latin pop tours. Even though I had left it, they were still calling me to do it. So it was like, okay, that's cool. I can live in LA and still be able to work. But yeah, really the only touring gigs for the most part I got when I was living in LA were still the Latin pop tours. So I couldn't get away.
So would you say that when you were in LA, you did more recording sessions?
I didn't do any recording sessions in LA.
Oh, where was the Santana thing?
That was all in Miami.
Oh, still in Miami. Okay.
The stuff I did in LA was just like the most random. Some of them were little gigs. Some of them were some of the tours that I was getting out of Miami. And just, I had my eyes set on, I want to audition for a bunch of tours and get on the Barry Squire list and all this stuff. And that never really panned out. I think I did a couple auditions or cattle calls, and I really didn't like that type of thing. But when I was, I kind of put that stuff on the back burner, like trying to get on a huge, pop arena tour. I put that on the back burner and just enjoyed my time in LA, playing little gigs. And that's kind of how I discovered, West Coast blues, or like that really early vintage blues, because that's something that I never was, there was never a scene in Miami for like old blues kind of vintagey stuff. That's one thing that I noticed that you don't really get anywhere else in the country except for Southern California in particular, is this like love for vintage culture and rockabilly, and it's it's a scene thing. That's something that I discovered living in LA, and that's kind of something that I took and made that a part of my style as a guitar player now, because I'm like, oh, this is something I can really gel with. So I started a band called RJ and the Del Guapos when I lived in LA. So that was kind of like, man, I love early rock and roll, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, stuff like that. So that kind of helped mold my style. Because when you're a session musician or a touring guy, you basically have to copy whatever style is on the record. You don't really have necessarily your own voice, and that you're hired to be able to copy whatever's on the record or whatever. I didn't know who I was as a musician until I started living in LA, because I kind of matured and was like, I was asking my question, so what kind of style do I play? What's my personal voice as a guitar player? So, blues was something that I've always loved ever since I was a kid. So that was definitely the core of my kind of my style, my guitar playing style. And LA was probably a big influence on that, because I was playing with rock bands, I was playing metal stuff, I was playing all different styles, but I wanted to play and learn about blues music and different types of subgenres within blues, and really, like we said, really nerd out about it and kind of get the history and how it works and where everything came from.
Nice. And after LA, where did you go?
Well, we moved around, parts of LA. And then 2013, towards the end of 2013, I had just gotten off of a tour with my friend Judith Hill.
I love her voice.
She's so good.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm really jealous of you for having played with her.
Man, that's another story, but that's like, it's funny how the universe works, how we met and how I continue to kind of appear in her life as a guitar player, because long story short, we met on a gig, like it was a TV gig. She was performing on the TV show, and I was in the house band, backing band. That's how we met initially, and then she took all of the band members' numbers because she was gigging around town, and she started calling us. Eventually, she just kept on calling me and not the other band members, and hired other band members. So like I was gigging with her around town for a lot of the time I was living in LA. And then I did that tour with her in 2013, and I moved to Chicago actually. So my wife and I just wanted to get out of LA. It was kind of too unaffordable for us for the way that we wanted to live. We wanted to live in a neighborhood that we couldn't afford and all this stuff. So we just like, let's go back to the Midwest, because we're both from Michigan, and we have a lot of friends that live in Chicago. Chicago is a great city. So we moved there, but I had also gotten a gig out of Nashville with a touring pop country group. So I had taken the gig and basically commuted between Chicago and Nashville for about a year and a half. So I was living or paying rent in Chicago, but I was basically down here in Nashville more. So where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so eventually we decided, let's just move to Nashville. That's where I'm working. I was touring every year. It was good gig or whatever. And then like 2 years ago, I was doing my normal Nashville touring gig, but then I got a call from Judith Hill to do some touring in Europe. I'm like, heck yeah, I want to go to Europe. It's been like, at that time, it was probably like 4 years since I had played with her and everything. So it was cool to get back into that jam hang and everything. So 2018, I'm kind of going all over the place. What was the original?
That's
question?
that's fine. That's fine.
But anyways, what I meant was like, yeah, it's funny because, I'm still, technically playing with Judith Hill now and then. It's crazy. After like over 10 years. It's been 10 years now, I think I've known her.
Okay, so you've done reggae, R&B, the whole SoCal blues. And how did you get the country call?
So my friend Victor Broden, who is a bass player that I met in college in Miami, actually, he had contacted me towards the end of 2013. I was still in LA. He was actually looking for me to recommend a guitar player for the gig. And I had told him, look, I'm leaving LA and I'm interested in getting a gig because I don't have anything. My plan was just going to Chicago and maybe getting some regular job and just hanging out for a little bit. Okay. So I'm like, you know what? I'm moving to Chicago, but Nashville's not that far, so I'll do the gig. But I had to audition. I had to send in like a video audition and do that whole thing. But I got the gig, so basically January 2014, I flew to Nashville to rehearse and get ready for this tour that would be most of the year and after that. So, yeah, that's how it happened.
So, country saved you from the regular workforce.
It did. It's always a sign. It's funny, like there's been multiple times in my life where I tried to leave music. I don't know why. Maybe because I just wasn't digging what I was doing at the time. Maybe it was like I was sick of playing in bars or I was sick of doing wedding band stuff. But there's 2 times prior to that time where I had like the first time I applied to culinary school in New York. I'm not getting the gigs I want. Let me just quit music for a little bit. And I was really into cooking. I still am. But I had applied to the French Culinary Institute in New York. Got accepted. I was looking for housing and everything. And then I believe that's when I started getting some other gigs in South Florida that were enough for me to just like do gigs for a living. So I'm like, okay, never mind. I won't go to cooking school. I'll just be a musician. So the second time I was doing these cover band gigs and, making a decent living, but it was boring. I hated playing covers. I was tired of just, 3-4 times a week, late nights and everything. So I decided to apply to Chinese medicine school. There was a there was a traditional Chinese medicine school in Fort Lauderdale, and I was really into health and acupuncture and like, Chinese herbal stuff and everything. And it was something genuinely, even to this day, I'm genuinely interested in that type of stuff. So I was like, you know what? Let me apply. So I got in, and I was going to send in my tuition and everything. And it would have been fine because I lived in Fort Lauderdale, so it was just like a matter of driving back and forth. So it wasn't a big move or anything. And then that's when I got the Ricky Martin gig.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, the universe tells me like, no, you are made to do music, so stop.
Yeah.
It pulls you back in. It's crazy.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So if I have any advice, if you're struggling and you want to get a gig, leave. Like try to leave music, and then maybe the universe will pull you back in.
Yeah. In my case, it was a pretty good wake-up call from my wife because we had just moved to the U.S. and first couple of years just adjusting here, nothing was really happening for me.
When did you move here?
2004.
Okay.
Yeah, so nothing was really happening for me, and I was just pretty much just staying at home and all that. And then just one night we were talking, and I was saying something like maybe I should get a job at Target or something, and she got pissed, dude. She got pissed. It's like, well, if you're gonna do that, let's just go back home to the Philippines, and that way you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that just woke me up. It's like, oh, okay, so stop, put that out of your mind, and just focus on what you need to do.
Yeah.
But
that's true. Yeah, she has a good point.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay, where were we? Nashville.
Yeah.
At the time, did you have a sort of an idea of the current trend where you could pretty much live anywhere, but you could still get calls for work, to do work and stuff?
Well, as a touring musician, you mean, or as a
Or as a just as a musician in general?
that's just now hitting me
Okay.
that I could, like, I don't necessarily have to be here in Nashville, but that's because of the industry that we're in now, which is, this whole YouTube online thing. Obviously, you have to be in Nashville to do touring stuff, but now it's kind of, I'm playing with the idea of, like, I can live basically anywhere now. People aren't relying on me to necessarily be somewhere in person, and which it's scary, but it's also awesome. I mean, my wife and I have talked about, like, different places we would like to move to, and probably right now is not the greatest time, but in the future.
Yeah. Well, and if they need you in person, they'll just fly you out. I mean, like
Yeah,
have been done in the past, you know?
yeah. I mean, it's a lot of it has to do with, now that I have a foothold in the industry or whatever, or people
Uh-huh.
know who I am, it's more common that can happen, because, like, so I was living here in Nashville, but Judith was living in LA still, but
Mm-hmm.
she still flew me out to LA to do rehearsals, and then flew me to Europe to do the gigs. So that can happen now, but maybe like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that would have never happened. You know. So I
Yeah.
feel like I'm old enough, like I've matured to a point where, my position in the industry is, I have a little more clout and say, I guess.
That's good. That's good. Okay, and then transitioning to our industry now, what was the deciding factor for you to switch from a touring musician to like a full time YouTube YouTuber?
It was kind of gradual. I was touring at the same time I was doing gear demo stuff. The first gear demo stuff I did was with Eastwood Guitars. So they would send me guitars whenever I was not touring, and I would work on those things, and then I would let them know that, hey, I'm going to be out for the next month or two, so I can't do anything. So it was cool. It was easy. Eventually, other companies started contacting me, like pedal companies and amp companies and everything. So it was cool because I was still touring, but whenever I would be home, which wasn't that much, maybe like a week or 2 weeks here and there, I always had work that I could do. So it was, extra income on top of the touring paycheck. And then, I did the Nashville touring gig for like 5 years, and towards the end of the fifth year, I was just burnt out basically on traveling and touring.
Okay.
I love playing music. I love playing live, but it was the travel and the touring that was very hard on my health
Yeah.
and rest and everything.
Okay. Hurry up and wait.
Yeah. It's just, there was times where I can't remember, but I basically had to take I was on a plane like every morning for like a week. Like I had to wake up at 3 a.m. every day for a good week to fly to different parts of the country, and it was just like, I can't, that's so
Yeah.
tough. That's like so, and then be expected to play a show that night and then to do the same thing over and over again, and that takes a toll after a while.
Yeah, because I remember watching your tour vlogs, like, and the first few tour vlogs you're really nice, fresh, excited, and towards the end, I I could see it.
Yeah, I like sleep too much. That's the thing. I like lying down and sleeping too much, and you can't do that when you have to walk through TSA and all that stuff. Basically, at the end of 2018, I decided to just make a clean break from touring and jump into the whole YouTube gear demo, whatever, lesson package thing full time, and it's been great. 2018, I basically did as much touring as I could. So not only did I have my Nashville touring gig, but the beginning of the year I subbed in for Stone Sour, and then I did 2 European runs with Judith that summer and then that fall. So I intentionally just got it all out of my system because I knew I was going to leave. And like my plan for the going YouTube full time was actually started a year prior to that. I would say 2017 is when I started getting the thoughts in my head like maybe I can not tour anymore at some point and just do YouTube, but we'll see how it goes. And so I did 2017 and 2018, and by 2018 I was like, yep, I'm gonna do this. I think the channel was creating enough momentum where I was comfortable enough to make that switch. That's what it took. I think it'd be harder if it's someone just jumping in, like someone who's a musician and just putting all their eggs in the basket of YouTube. It's scary. For me, I was scared. So I told myself, if I feel that my channel is doing well enough where I can trust that I can possibly make a living just doing that, then I'll make the complete switch.
Now, around that time, was your channel pulling in enough revenue to sort of like compensate for the lack of touring?
Was
it getting there?
When I quit touring, you mean?
Yeah. Like while you were touring, maybe 2018.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
What was your channel?
I saw the revenue from YouTube. I saw that as just a nice kind of cherry on top of my regular touring income. So it was definitely not something I could just live off of.
Yeah.
Just that. But a lot of people don't know, at least for me, a lot of the income I make isn't just from one source. It's
right.
Not just from YouTube ad revenue. I have my hands in multiple things, and that's the only way that I can make it work.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much the way musicians do it nowadays. You can't just do one thing and have it pay for everything. You gotta spread out your fingers and put them in different pies.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thankfully learned that while I was touring, and that was kind of on accident. I would have been fine just being a touring musician, and that was my only income. But because of what's happening now, my friends that did that, are unfortunately not touring anymore, so they have to, struggle to find something else. So I think I was lucky that I decided to get into YouTube and all this other, the gear demo thing, just to put my hands in other revenue streams. Because, now that we're not touring, I still have other things that I can do.
Right.
I want to get to a point where I have videos a month in advance, but it never gets to that point. I think there's the best that I've ever done. I think I had videos like 3 weeks in advance, and then I'm like, oh, I can just sit back and rest and whatever. And then once they were uploaded, I'm like, oh man, I don't have any more videos.